Let's start off with the voter suppression front. The Columbus Dispatch reported today that there's a data glitch in Cuyahoga County, Democratic-leaning county, and that it has to do with data sharing. Is it just a coincidence that I'm not sure who to direct it? If any of you are familiar with this, Hillary.
Well, I can start out by saying we don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but it's a problem.
Yeah.
And very well, we have to make sure this doesn't interfere with people's opportunity to fully participate in this electoral process as we move towards Tuesday. The NAACP has deployed monitors into Cuyahoga County, as well as the Justice Department, we're very happy to announce, has also deployed official federal monitors into Cuyahoga County to look into this issue and other issues of that concern. The bottom line here is that we have to make sure we do everything to prevent any obstacles to full voter participation in Cuyahoga County, throughout the state of Ohio, and any place else for that matter.
Well, I think it's very interesting. Why is it that all of these glitches happen in minority communities?
Yeah, and have for decades.
And have for decades. And why do we have the glitch allegedly in Miami of the, quote, 1,000 lost, black voters, votes? I mean, I think that we have to really make sure that the election protection effort that we're part of, and that whole coalition, that we keep our eyes on every single jurisdiction, because what's happening is that people are being told that even though they registered, that they are not on the registration list. Right. That's been the problem in Ohio. And it's happened in Franklin County, it's happened in Cuyahoga County, where suddenly people who registered are not being found.
They've been purged.
And well, it's actually it's deeper than that. It's that the way they search for names and the way they search for data to find somebody on the registration rolls is incomplete, and they're doing a poor job of it. And it's turned out that many people who they have told are not registered are in fact registered. So they have them down to go back behind the scene and give those people absentee ballots and give them the access to the ballot. But it just shows you that we need in this country serious electoral reform in order to provide for the opportunity for every voter to be able to vote and have that vote counted.
Yeah, we absolutely do. Barbara, could you briefly tell us about your organization and what it's
Yes, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law is a 50-year-old civil rights legal organization. We'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary in 2013. We were founded by President John F. Kennedy to make sure that the private bar, private lawyers, gave their pro bono resources to promote civil rights and racial equality and equality for those who are disadvantaged by income. So we have been out there fighting these problems. We've been part of the battle to pass the '64 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and we fought for its reauthorization. We've been in the courts challenging and killing these horrible voter ID, voter suppression laws. We helped to kill the one in South Carolina for this year, at least, where it will not be in effect, and to kill the one in Texas for this, certainly for this year, and I don't think that they can come up with another law that they can pass. Yeah. We've also been able to, through the Department of Justice's actions, put on hold Mississippi and Alabama so that their laws don't go into effect. Indeed, of the 8 laws that were passed to come up with this restrictive voter ID, the amazing story for the civil rights community, and that includes the Advancement Project and the Lawyers Committee and the ACLU and all of the fighters, the Brennan Center, that we've been able to, those 8 laws, we've been able to stop 6 of them.
That's great. Catherine, tell us, first of all, your thoughts on what we've been discussing up to this point, and also about what your organization is doing right now.
Yeah, we've been also doing litigation in Florida and Ohio. I've done some litigation in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, and across the country, and working in coalition with all the groups. And this year, we've really seen an unprecedented wave of voter suppression. And now we're at the stage where we've won a lot of our lawsuits. I guess that's because we're right on the facts and on the law, and we're hoping that voters won't be confused. We're going to be out there, thousands of us on Election Day to make sure that voters don't feel intimidated. We've seen a recent wave of deceptive practices. So Advancement Project and some other groups, won a case against a purge in Florida, and now a private individual has sent letters out to folks saying you need to prove your citizenship in order to vote. We've seen a lot of discriminatory impact on Latinos this year because they're a big voting bloc, and on African Americans and on others. And so there's a lot that's been happening the last couple of weeks. These disappearing names, registered registration problems and, you know, just the familiar tricks, but they're sort of ramped up a little bit this year because we've had to fight back so hard. So we really hope that everyone doesn't feel intimidated, that they come out and vote, and they know that we've got their back. You know, we're going to protect voting rights.
Billboards even. Now we found out that this family foundation, it just came out, this right-wing family.
But have you heard that they have something new?
What's that?
They have gone from the big, stable billboards now to van billboards.
Oh, so they're driving
They have
around?
big old professional billboards on big old vans that say, "Stop voter fraud." And they are parking in front of minority precincts and prominently displaying those in red, white, and blue and trying to scare
And it's not just stop voter
voters.
fraud, it's you can go to jail.
And the problem is that nobody knows. See, the average citizen, when you say voter fraud, they don't have any idea what you're talking about.
Right. So people are thinking, maybe if I go in and I just check the wrong box or something, I'm going to end up going to jail.
That's right.
Wait a minute. It's not worth the hassle.
That's right. And
Yeah.
listen, in our communities, because the police have such strained relationships with our communities, people do go to jail for the oddest reasons, for, quote, looking, insubordinate, and all these other crazy things. So our communities really do not trust law enforcement when it comes to voting. And remember that, especially in the Latino community, where you have the military that has blocked people from voting in the past in many of those countries, that the presence of law enforcement is really threatening.
Hillary, this is nothing new. I mean, in a very real way. Chief Justice Rehnquist, former Chief Justice Rehnquist, made his chops in the Republican Party in the late 50s and early 60s in Phoenix, Arizona, or in the surrounding areas, showing up at election precincts during elections in principally Native American and Hispanic areas. He was a big, tall guy, 6'2", showing up and threatening people to, show me your ID, basically intimidating them away from their polls. And this is how he made his name in Republican politics. This has been going on for a long time.
Oh, for all too long. As a matter of fact, you've given the PG version of the kind of things that Rehnquist was responsible for, the reports we've gotten on Rehnquist, Lester Maddox, and so many other of those politicians of that day that made their names actually intimidating voters. They used to call them axe handle brigades. Axe handle. The reason they call them that is because
Lester used to actually carry one.
That's exactly right. Because axe handles are hard enough to really hurt, but they say they weren't thick as a baseball bat and wouldn't actually create long-term damage to the person you were chasing away from the polls. It was that kind of intimidation we saw then. In many ways, we're seeing the same kind of intimidation in a more high-tech fashion now. When we talk about issues along the lines that Barbara Arnwine very clearly laid out, when we talk about the kind of intimidation that misleads people, gives them the wrong day to go to the polls to vote, sends out robocalls telling you that because you're such a good voter in the past, you can actually vote over the telephone right now and don't have to show up at the polls to vote on election day. All kind of things.
So people think they've already voted.
They think they've already voted. They don't turn out, and it creates all kind of problems.
And now we discover that the Romney campaign is training their poll watchers, which are going to be the first people you encounter as you walk into the poll.
Absolutely.
They're training them, and many of these people probably believe this with the very best of intentions, in states that don't require photo IDs or don't require multiple IDs, where you've already registered and your signature is enough. Training them that they have to ask for photo IDs. They're going to be challenging people.
Well, one of the things, the Election Protection Coalition is a nonpartisan, organization, and it's a coalition of, many, many organizations, 150 of us, plus, 200 law firms that, put thousands of volunteers out into the streets to help protect voters. And we are very worried about the mistraining of poll workers. And it's not just, campaigns. We're also seeing True to Vote, doing the same kind of misleading miseducation. We're seeing, other organizations doing this, and I don't think it's an accident that they get the law wrong, and that they have unwitting people. So you have that whole incident in one city where people were challenging Somalian naturalized citizens as they went to vote because they said they did not vote, they did not speak English well. Now, thank you, everybody. There's something called the Voting Rights Act, and it has a Section 203 that is a bilingual provision for people who are naturalized citizens and who want to, have English assistance. And so it's just a crazy notion. But they actually were challenging people, telling them they couldn't vote because they did not speak English well. And I think that's the racism. I mean, we can't get over the fact that there's this hidden subconscious, subliminal, sometimes explicit racism, where people really believe that folks of color are not the people who should be the beneficiaries of this democracy and should not be participants in it, and purposely.
It's like, well, the Confederacy never really went away. Two of the three of you are attorneys, and I'm just curious. The Constitution mentions the phrase right to vote several times, and it's been amended with the phrase right to vote several times, but it's always been in very narrow, people shall not be denied the right to vote based on race. People shall not be denied the right to vote based on gender. Is there, am I misreading that, is there no explicit federal right to vote? Does anybody, or should there be? Catherine?
Well, there definitely should be. There isn't an explicit right to vote, an enumerated right to vote in our Constitution, and we're one of the few countries that doesn't have it. Iran doesn't have it, and we don't. South Africa has an enumerated right to vote, and so it's an explicit fundamental right. And since Bush v. Gore, many of us have been thinking that we really need to do a campaign to have an explicit constitutional right to vote.
In Bush v. Gore, the decision from the Supreme Court explicitly pointed out that there's no specific enumerated right to vote.
Right, and then we wouldn't have a patchwork.
Well, and quite frankly, it was from that Jesse Jackson Jr. actually introduced legislation to create an amendment to the Constitution that would establish an affirmative right to vote. Though certainly not abridging the right to vote is acceptable now, and very clearly no one's vote should be abridged or in any other ways interfered with. But having that affirmative right will be more deliberative.
Yeah, this is Barbara. This is one of those vestiges of slavery in the very beginning, just like the electoral college.
It's the federalism system.
I mean,
it's one of the problems that we have in this country is that we have 50 states with 50 different election laws. And that is a huge problem because it creates all kinds of confusion. Because nobody can say to a neighbor or to a friend in a different state what their law is, because the law of their state is going to be totally different than one. So it doesn't make sense that if somebody who is an ex-felon in one state can vote, but leaves that state and moves to Florida and all of a sudden discovers they can't vote anymore. These are the kinds of inconsistencies that we see repetitively in this country. So what we need in this country is massive electoral reform to make our state laws more uniform, to be more open for voters, more accessible for voters, and we need to do away with all of this history of slavery. I mean, most people don't realize that all of these felon disenfranchisement laws are based in slavery. They don't even know the Electoral College
was based in
slavery. Anti-black prejudice against African Americans in this country has increased from 2008, and it's also increased. Anti-Hispanic prejudice has also increased. And I think a lot of that's because in a lot of these advertisements that super PACs and others are doing, there's a lot of hidden racial coding.
Oh, sure. In fact, could it be that it's not so much that prejudice has increased, but the willingness of people to express it to a pollster has increased? People are more willing to say it out loud.
No, I think the environment has been created now where it's more acceptable for people to feel that they can express that racism. When you have people, members of Congress, yelling in the well of Congress during a State of the Union at the president, "You lie." When you have, these kinds of, expressive, all of this, what things that Limbaugh and so many others say, I think it creates that atmosphere. And then when you have these, these ads talking about food stamps and talking about welfare, we know who they're talking about. They're not talking about the majority of the real recipients who are white, but it's in the minds of people that it's those other people.
It's become code for people.
It's code. And I think that's the problem that I see also, is that not only are they in this whole pro-business movement, but they also have this movement that is very racially based.